All right, I am thrilled to have a special guest today, Samantha Jansky. I'm going to give her an opportunity to share a little bit about who she is and where she is working with. If you have been following the Mama Says Namaste podcast for long or any of our materials, you've probably heard Nathan and me talk about Actin Academy and this school that we learned about by actually reading the book Courage to Grow, which was written by the founder, Laura Sandifer. And we were exposed to that book by my father. He kind of introduced me to the concept, and I loved it. And so as I started to learn about Actin Academy, and I kind of joked that it was kind of like a private school for unschoolers, which was a whole different concept than some of the other school models I'd seen. It kind of opened the door to an amazing organization and some methods that then I took into my personal homeschooling experience. So I want to stop with that, open the door for Samantha to share a little bit more about what Actin is and what her role is with it, and then get into the conversation about Socratic dialogue and the Socratic method and what that means and why we both believe how important and valuable it is in our growth and development for our children, and I say quite honestly for us as well. So welcome, Samantha. Thank you for being here.
Thanks. Thanks for having me. It's a real pleasure. I've really enjoyed learning from your website and listening to some of your podcasts. So I'm glad to be here. Yeah, this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. I've been a Socratic guide for 8 years. I joined the original Actin Academy in 2012 as an apprentice, hoping to change the world in education. I didn't know what that would look like. But little did I know I wasn't just joining a small school. It would then turn into this movement to empower children. And
what was your first experience? So if people don't know Actin, I've talked about it on here.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
But some of the things there's differences in Actin from a traditional school. So
right.
Can you give a quick breakdown there, just so people understand when you say you're a Socratic guide, where
yes.
does Actin?
So, Actin now is this network of, it's a global community of learner-driven schools. They're run by parent entrepreneurs. And all Actin academies are slightly different from each other, and actually, but very different from other schools. So all Actins share a few things in common that set them apart. The most powerful of those include the hero's journey as a philosophical underpinning for nearly all experiences in our community. So the young learners at our school are, they're given the narrative that they are a hero on a journey. We have a deep belief that every child is a genius, has genius within them, special gifts that make them unique. And we believe that every child deserves to find a calling that will change the world. So on top of those core beliefs that set us apart from everyone else, we implement Socratic guiding, and not teaching. And we don't teach anything, actually, which can be very shocking for some to hear. There's nothing wrong with being a teacher. The world needs teachers, but in our studios, which is our word for classroom, we don't have a hierarchical structure, and we don't disseminate information. The adults don't disseminate information. Instead, guides, the adults in the room, offer challenges and questions to empower learners. We empower them to find answers on their own using the tools and resources they have available. We offer hands-on quests, which is kind of like a project-based curriculum, but with a narrative and a clear goal at the end that puts them in the shoes of heroes in different fields. And the children choose what to work on every day. So they set goals for themselves, and which are really just promises to themselves on what they'll accomplish each day or each month, however far they want to go out. So those are kind of like the key things, but really, if I had to narrow it down, it would be that a lot of schools around the globe are innovating right now, which is really exciting. Mm-hmm. But as far as I know, Actin's the only model that's really transforming the role of the adult. So the children are in charge. They set contracts that establish how they want to live in this community together. They hold each other accountable to those contracts. They hold each other accountable to goals. The guide's role is to offer challenges and make sure that the tools and resources are available and that the environment's set up for them to be independent, but then to step back. Mm-hmm. And so if we're working ourselves out of a job, then we're doing something right. If we can hand off responsibility to the children and we become invisible or can even leave and the studio still functions, then you have a healthy Actin.
Oh, that's wonderful. I love it so much, and it fits so well with what we do in unschooling, because with unschooling we believe so much in that internal motivation. So we talk about, and one of the concepts that I share often on the podcast is our functional education model. And the functional education being that mind, body, soul, that it goes beyond a classroom, it goes beyond a grade level or a grade, and is a lifelong process that we don't stop. So when people say, yeah, when did you start unschooling? I'm like, when she was born, in the womb. They're learning as soon as they're being developed. Yeah. So, this process is ongoing. And that process of, I love what you're saying. It really is not about necessarily the things that we need to change our children on, as much as a reset of the way we're approaching them. And you have there is an implied expectation of children that they are going to succeed when they're coming to you. And we talk about this often with law of attraction being so important. And where we focus on, where our intention is, that's where our energy flows. That's where we tend to go. And so, you're establishing a framework of success. And not only are you expecting greatness out of them, but you also are opening that door for accountability. And I think that's where that little bit of structure comes in, where it's not just a free-for-all with unschooling, where it's just anything you feel like ever. It's, okay, so where is your direction and purpose? Where can you go with it? And then I'm going to be that person to support and guide that and help to push you in your accountability. Strew things around. We talk about strewing, where you lay things out that will pique a kid's interest, but you don't necessarily say you have to do this. You make opportunities available to guide them and push them to grow, because we all have those opportunities for stagnancy where we're not motivated. So it is important to do, but yeah, you create a lot of personal accountability and responsibility in doing it. And it is a big mindset shift as a parent to assume that our children don't need to be told everything, but actually need to have an open door to pave it instead.
Well, and I think that comes back to an understanding that, we have as guides and parents, is that we've seen it over and over, but that children are capable of far more than we could ever imagine. And we check ourselves often on that too. I still find myself surprised, and I believe so deeply in what they can do, because I've seen, what we found is that when children have freedom within boundaries, when they have a real reason that matters to them to do something, they'll not only learn on their own, but do extraordinary things. But yes, we believe in them fully. We also offer opportunity for failure. So what you were saying about success, yes, the opportunity is there for success, and you have a community of people who are with you and believe in you. But on the hero's journey, there's so much failure. And we believe in failing early, cheaply, and often. And that doesn't mean that we think failure is this happy, wonderful experience. Failure is hard, but it's necessary. And, I think that's one of the reasons why the role of the parent in the Actin model is one of the hardest, is because it is hard to watch your children struggle and allow them to struggle. And I'm a new parent. I have a 2-year-old, but even I'm pulling on my foundation in the hero's journey frequently, because tough to let her fail. It's so hard to do.
It is
It's so
so
important.
it is so hard. And yeah, and even thinking about the lines of that with a toddler, as they're learning to walk, you don't want them to fall and get down, but they are not going to know how to stand unless they have felt the impact of the fall and to negotiate that balance. Okay, say what you said again, because it's a great mantra for us to have. How do you fail? When do you want people to fail?
Early, cheaply, and often.
Early, cheaply, and often. Think about that. If you allow your children to fail early, cheaply, and often, think back on your own failures in life and how often we want to get things right so often that when the failure happens, it's a big one. And it's something that really slaps us in the face. I've shared about my dad, doing a business venture and then going in the hole $430,000, losing everything. It was a big, big bust and failure. We have those big things that happen in our lives. Whoa, what an amazing opportunity we have as parents to allow for some little ones that aren't as risky. I'd rather have my 13-year-old go on 15 business ventures right now, where she has an Etsy store, a Redbubble store, a Society 6 store, a website, and she has friendship bracelets, crochet, paintings, Indian beadwork, all of these different things that she's doing. Man, have at it. Try them all with the risk of a 13-year-old playing with this before you go out there with those other ones, so that you do learn those things that work, and not just what works and doesn't work, but more about yourself in the process.
How to get back up.
Failures, right? Each one of these failures will make you or break you. So yeah, it's where have you learned from this and where have you grown? That has been one of the most incredible things going to the Actin schools. We've had the privilege and the opportunity to go and to speak as a family to some schools across the country, some Actin academies of different variations across the country, and that's always a question I get from a kid, usually a child under 10 years old, who asks me, what was a failure you had in your life and what did you learn from it? I mean, how incredible that we're having those. And so that opens the door to the Socratic Method. So failure, the whole process of empowering our children to create their own path and supporting them and being a guide to help push them forward and to go where they're naturally bent anyway, as opposed to us programming it. That first step is the biggie that you said. Like, in order to do that, we have to be okay with the fact that failure is a part of that process. Right. And that is a really hard thing as a parent to do. The second part of that, and in allowing for failure, that means you're not telling them everything. So how do you go from, constantly narrating your child's life as a form of education, or maybe not having those conversations with your kid? What type of conversations do you have to start building this growth mindset in our children?
Well, I think it's, really, like we were talking about before, it comes back to your mindset and your approach when you're interacting with a young person. So one thing I loved that Jeff said was, Jeff Sandifer said once, was true masters at a Socratic craft know that they are beginners, not experts. It's a constant practice. I think that comes from, what Socrates himself said, which was, the only true wisdom is knowing that you know nothing. And so coming to the conversation with humility is so important, but also being very curious. So the guides, and I say this is true for parents too, whenever you're engaging, if we're leading, whether we're leading a Socratic discussion or we're helping to facilitate a conflict resolution, or parents at home, if you come to the conversation with true curiosity, without an agenda, without a bias, to really understand what's going on, to really understand their process, that opens up the door for so much trust to be shared. And, and I think from trust can come very deep and valuable conversations. So being truly curious. establishing, again, that trust in belief in young people, and not having an ego. So I don't know how that, I don't know how that would apply in a parenting situation. I think it's really important, but I can speak from a Socratic Guide perspective, is that it's never about us, in the good or the bad. So when a child is doing something really wonderful, it's not, oh, look at, my heart is full because
I taught them well.
I did that. I helped them out. If you're getting anything, that's not what children are. They're these beautiful, complicated beings on their own. They're not there to serve us, right?
And if this, in the same respect, if they're not liking something, it's not necessarily I failed because I led them down a path of something they didn't like. It could be oh wow, I gave them an opportunity to learn something about themselves that didn't sit well with them. I gave them, they got an opportunity to learn better what they don't want and what they don't enjoy or anything else, or they find that in that struggle that they are able to get something else out of it. So yeah, sometimes the negativity that comes or the kickback or something we can take as a personal thing, and it really is it's their understanding, their insights, their epiphanies as they go.
It's their journey, right? And so I think going into the discussion with just checking your mindset beforehand, but then, to approach this practically as well, what makes a good question? Never answer questions or never ask questions that you know the answer to. First of all, children will see right through that if you're trying to guide them to a direction, and then that shows a lack of respect. So, but then it's also kind of boring because then all I am as a child is playing a game with you to figure out what you want me to say. So if you're really asking a genuine question that you don't know the answer to, that will be felt. Curiosity. And then, which I'm going to probably say a few more times as well, asking questions with A or B options. So avoiding open-ended questions as much as possible. So like an example of that would be different from, at the end of the day, your child jumps in your car and you say, how was your day? It might be, what did you enjoy most today? Setting challenging SMART goals, participating in Socratic discussion, or playing on the field with your friends. That's just, it's a very simple question, but just having these options, and you can pull on what you do know in terms of to be able to answer those questions. Another thing might be, who helped you today, or who did you help? There's different ways to approach these questions about their day that offer them some choices to pull from before the question or before the conversation begins.
And there can be powerful questioning in the way that you position the questions that, yes, can guide the conversation just like that. Not how was your day, which is an immediate opportunity for a shutdown, right. But giving an opportunity to kind of pick between two, but it's not a yes or no answer. So it's more about the thing. And going back to that curiosity, yes, instead of being interesting, be interested. And if you are interested in someone, that raises questions. That means you're having to ask those questions to pull that out. So we talk about that a lot. If in discussions, if you're having conflict, you're not seeing eye to eye, first seek to understand. First figure out what's going on. So thinking about that, as we're learning about our children, and just that simple shift. We are not teaching our children everything. We are learning where our children are in the process and how they tick, and learning what they're processing, what they're asking for, and how we can best support them. And if we can go into it with that, then that is with an air of curiosity. We have to ask those questions, and those questions that we can guide to deeper conversation is amazing. And so what are some of the questions like that you guys have used? Because I know you have some just incredible questions that not only are great conversations, but I want you also to let us know the age group that you're asking these questions in, because that was something that was a big eye-opener for me as well, how much you expect and assume their capabilities at a very young age.
So, yeah, some of my favorite questions over the years. One is truth discovered or created?
Mm,
That one. These are some of our big overarching ones. Does power corrupt? Um, what does it mean to be human? Um, these are some of our big questions that kind of guide our year that we grapple with. One that came up recently was, what's more important, listening or speaking? Or
yeah.
whose responsibility is it to, when you're maybe in a disagreement with someone, whose responsibility is it um, to better understand what happened? Is it the person who's telling their story, or the person who's listening to it? Like, is it my responsibility to interpret what you're saying, or is it your responsibility to speak in a certain way? These are just a few examples that we've sort of grappled with. The age range is, for these questions in particular, is 6 to 11. And so we start with very deep conversations about history as well. Identifying certain character traits. What does it take to be a hero and maybe an activist during a civil rights movement? Does it take more perseverance or courage? So they learn stories about heroes and are asked questions about what they're observing in those stories, and then also questions that put them in the shoes of the hero. Imagine you were in this scenario. Would you do this, or would you do this? And so but the questions should always be tough to answer. It's hard to take a stand, but they're asked to. And really inspires some incredible thought and expression.
And so with that, they're asked to take a stand. Is there a right answer? Is there an expectation? What is success in the Socratic model? What is seen as successfully using this method?
Yeah, there's never a right answer. So if you're asking a question that has a right answer, it's not a Socratic question. And so success would be, the best discussions are when they're fully debating.
Uh-huh.
People take hard stands to start the discussion, and then slowly, after the dialogue happens, they switch sides and change their minds. And so part of the practice is that they learn so we establish rules of engagement of a discussion first. And one of the rules of engagement is to say, I agree or I disagree with the previous comment. So they declare where they're coming from. Mm-hmm. And the best Socratic discussions happen when someone says, I changed my mind because of this point. And, they explain their process as well. So if the energy is high and you're asking great follow-up questions that are coming up from the other learners, that's the best. And everyone walks away still curious and still.
Oh, and just thinking about all of this that this opens up is, you're setting a whole different framework of coming into something with that seek to understand curiosity approach. So it's not pitted toward, who's going to win. It's not a right or wrong scenario. And how important that is for us in life as our children grow. Especially with all of the complexities of what is 2020 right now. We've got so many convoluted things that are going on. There's so many different perspectives and different nuances, and being able to kind of have discussions and recognize that my viewpoints can change. They can, and recognize that what works for one may not work for someone else, and understanding those, and having that flexibility in not having every answer answered, or every question answered, and not finding the solution in life all the time, is building those critical thinking skills. And then the other aspect of it is what you just said, is hitting on the empathy, that you're taking them into imagination with a very clear intention of, let's experience what it's like. Let's kind of sit in these different stories we've now written in our head and we've philosophized and theorized about. Let's sit in this and see how does that feel for us, and where can we go from this, what we can do from it. So I mean, critical thinking skills, empathy, curiosity, I mean, those are definitely things that I want to make sure my children have at all times.
Well, and you know, the main reason we even have these conversations is it links back to our overall philosophy of learning, which is that clear thinking leads to good decisions. Good decisions lead to the right habits. The right habits become character, and character becomes destiny. And so it all kind of starts with creating this environment where they can be clear thinkers. Mm-hmm. And then one thing I wanted to build on that might be helpful to your listeners is that the stories don't have to just be about heroes in history. I mean, in our civilization discussions, yes, we put them in the shoes of a leader in ancient times who maybe had a hostile state nearby, but starving citizens. You know, do you invest in your military or do you invest in agriculture? Or, you know, and those are some of the big questions they grapple with using, you know, stories that we read from history. But then really powerful conversations come from interviewing a hero. So we have heroes come visit our studio and asking them about their lives. And so as parents, if parents can start seeing themselves as heroes with important stories as well, without telling what happened, you can have great conversations with your children where you tell them a story, maybe a very difficult experience in your life or a great failure you had. Without telling them the ending, you put them at that moment where you had to make a decision. Would you do A or B? And that's a great way to also relate to what they're going through. If you're trying to communicate with your child more about their struggles, sharing your own is powerful. We really believe in stories.
Very much so. We tend to hold on to the stories. The stories, you know, wrap the logic and the scenario around it where we can replay it in our minds. And so it more attaches us to it. And yeah, in a story, we can oftentimes find some element that we can connect to, something that we can empathize with and hold on to. But creating space for the questions in your home is just so powerful. And that is something that is just a clear intention. And that's what I love about Actin that takes me a step further with my unschooling, is that it's not that I want my children to be internally motivated, and I want to see that delight-led learning. And I recognize that this is an ongoing process. You know, parenting isn't one and done. You don't just have them and it's over. We know that we're parents for the rest of our lives, and there are always opportunities for us to learn from our children just as much as they can learn from us. And just starting those conversations of just questions can just open up so many insights. And I have been blown away from the fact that, you know, I hear from Actin that you're asking 6-year-olds a question, and I'm going, well, my goodness, Juliet, what do you think? And I hear from my 7-year-old this, you know, deeply philosophical discussion on the meaning of life, and I'm going, whoa, this is amazing. She's not tainted by any shoulds of what she thinks it should be. She's creating this on her own, and this is so fresh and new and beautiful, and I want to support and encourage that. And you know, ask another question that challenges her a bit more. And it just builds on each other. And then you'll start to not only be creating those critical thinkers, but then you're going to create those ones who start to look at life in those questions. What does this mean?
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Go ahead.
I didn't mean to interrupt. I get so excited about these questions. I was just saying, and be problem solvers. You know, I think that's the next step too.
Right. It's looking at that as those questions then start to become natural in your head. So yes, when there is a problem, it's okay, what can I learn from this? What does this make possible? How can I grow? What will I do differently next time? All of these different questions that then you can theorize, philosophize, try something new, try and fail cheaply, fastly, quickly. All of these things when you are young. And enjoy that process. The older we get, the more we see the complexities and the and all the variations in life the more we see that life is a whole lot of gray, and what works for one doesn't work for another. And if we can start by laying that foundation of fluidity with our children, so they understand the goal is not right or wrong answers as much as it's critical thinking to navigate your journey through it,
Mm-hmm.
it's a whole different slant and approach that we can do with our children that empowers them way beyond a test score or anything else they're going to get in school.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I will say one thing about like just a fun next step for parents. Anytime that we see a problem happening in the studio, or culture collapses and they rebuild, and it's part of the process, and it's beautiful and it's messy, we, inadvertently, the adults sit around and try to come up with a solution. It's just what we do. And
right.
We're usually wrong. And I will say every time that we've brought it back to the learners, after all of these skills you were just talking about, what it means to be a real critical thinker, they always come up with a solution. And so I just wonder how many parents out there are also creating those opportunities at home for problems at home, and really bringing their child into the conversation, asking the tough questions, and allowing their child space to problem solve at home with the family as well.
Right. And we talk a lot about that same model that you guys do in Actin, where, creating a family vision, like start with looking at not just as parents, but as a family, your whole family, addressing what do we want this home to look like? What do we want this life to look like? And kind of getting on that, but then having those conversations with our kids on, who do you want to be? Where do you want to go? And how can I help you? And grow that process is so powerful. What was I going to say on that? Oh yeah. Coming in with the solutions as the parents, we can sometimes we automatically just assume the pressure of finding the answer. And I did a whole series on bedtime battles. And okay, so number one, first and foremost, what do you want for your family? Talk about it, not just as parents, but with your children. Come up with a family vision. Number two, talk with your children. What do you imagine bedtime should look like? Let's have a discussion about it. Let's hear from your kids. What do you imagine it would be? Because if they have a whole agenda and expectation that they have written that bedtime is supposed to be a certain way, and we come with our own agenda and expectation, I mean, this is the same thing that I talk about in marriages and us coming with our different expectations. We have to open the door to understand where our kids coming from. They could be completely in a fairy tale world, or they really just want, bedtime to be a super fast thing and not hear the long dialogue you do because they're talked out for the day. So recognizing where they're at and what their desires are then also means that those things that you do enforce, those rules, those guidelines that you have that are, or those non-negotiables in your family, are things that are enforced by everyone. And you see that, Samantha, you see that at Actin, because your students, the heroes, the eagles around are self-regulating. They're checking themselves because they made the rules.
They matter to them, right? When they're part of it. Yeah.
It matters. And when it's personal and when it matters, and you've invested in the creation process, you're way more likely to adhere to it. All right. So with all of that, yes. Any thoughts for getting started? If they're hearing all of this and like, this is great, how do I have that first conversation? I mean, you've given some great tips on how to lay this all out. So just what would be your last piece of advice for parents for getting started with this?
Well, we at Ascent, that's what our Actin is called, Ascent and Actin Academy. We tell our parents, first and foremost, you're not a Socratic Guide. You do have a different role, but there are the great guidelines you can follow that can help conversations at home, better questions to ask. And I can't think of a better way to do it than to just dive in and start wondering about, even if you're home, a lot of parents are home with their children all day right now. Even if you're home all day, what are you deeply curious about today? What did you see today that made you wonder something new? That's an open-ended question, but it can at least get them kind of started in understanding that you really care about what they have to say and their unique perspective. And then the other piece is beyond just starting off right off the bat and asking questions. I'm not sure. I think I would just start right away. Would be to just see what, take a minute and look at your environment. Does your environment empower your child? Are there opportunities for them to fail? Are there opportunities for them to do something on their own that has been done for them? How involved are they in the day-to-day of your family? So I think stepping back, a big part of what we do as Socratic Guides is observe. We observe. That's from Maria Montessori. She was first and foremost a scientist, and she observed. And so we do that too. And from that, you just learn a lot if you come at it from true curiosity.
And recognizing just what you said, that it's not that you are positioning that a parent is a Socratic guide, that is a professional role with a certain focus that you have in the creation
contract.
Yes, it's a contract. Right. But we as parents, that can take some of the pressure off. We don't have to get it right and get every single question exact, but we do have the opportunity to be adding this in. And it's not that we need to come with an agenda of these are the right Socratic questions. Start with one question that's a good question and see what happens, because if you're truly curious, then your curiosity is going to drive those questions, not the right questions that you're getting.
Yeah, it's all about the mindset first.
Yes. Okay, so that is our challenge for those of you that are listening on the podcast or that are watching this video, is just look at that. Open up the conversation with your child. Ask them a question of pure curiosity and let that curiosity lead the discussion so that you may get some more insights. I loved your suggestion as well of sharing a story of growth in your own life, but not sharing the ending and asking your child what they would do first. I love that. I mean, and that also is great, even if you're sharing those stories where you didn't make the right decision. And you can ask them what they would do. And even, that can help to affirm to them too, that, hey, mommy messed up. I would have made the decision differently. She's human and I still love her. And, it's okay to fail. So those opportunities can be wonderful. I love the Socratic Method and the inspiration that Actin has given to me. And that's another reminder to everyone that there are a lot of school options out there. Look for what works for your family. And even if you find something that maybe it's not a perfect fit because of finances or location or anything else, can you still be inspired by it? Can you still get something out of it? We're a full-time traveling family, so being in an Actin school didn't quite fit with our traveling model that we wanted for our family. But I have found so much inspiration and encouragement and affirmation for what we're doing because of me paying attention to and learning from the things that you're doing with your students or with your group there. And it's not students. I've said eagles and I've said heroes. And your students are called, which one?
You can call them by the mascot, which is eagle. We at Ascent, we refer to, Janita Lavani, my co-founder, and I decided to refer to the young people in our community as learners or heroes.
Learners or heroes. And you think about just what that mindset has and the words that we do say and how we are empowering our children and giving them their opportunity to step up and shine. So you're thinking about how to, rephrase the things you say or not say or tell as much as ask your family. All right. Well, thank you so much for being on and for connecting with us today. I love doing this and getting even more and more insights how we can all look at how the uniqueness in each of us strengthens all of us. Namaste.
Namaste.
1, 2, 3. Up with the rising sun, already on the run. Mama says, namaste. Life is a tangled mess, and you don't have to stress. Mama says namaste. 'Cause today I will stand up and be all the change that I want to see in this world. Boys and girls, you gotta have to stand up to be free. Namaste in your heart. Take a deep breath in and let's start a brand new day. With Mama says namaste.